causality. What a trip. If you believe your weapon wants to murder all existence, then so it will. Call it a little bad juju, if you please.
What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages? Joker back again, once again, and today we're talking about Bad Juju. But before we get started, we have to visit the elephants in the room, the two giant, enormous elephants that are standing currently in this room. The first one is a glitch currently going on in PvP where people don't load into the game. Sure, the player will still be there, but they'll be invisible to you. This will also happen to you where your character model will be invisible and your weapons will be invisible. It looks kinda something like this. So this has made getting footage for Bad Juju in Crucible very, very frustrating. So if you're seeing a lot of reuse clips, that's why. Usually I try to go in and get about 10-15 minutes of cut down footage just to kind of montage, but I didn't do that here because it was just, Crucible right now is unbearable. Second, and quite possibly the more important of the two, you don't just unlock Bad Juju. No. It's not that easy. You have to place a bunch of statues in the Hall of Triumphs. This is a huge resource drain, and it was intended to be one, with the sole purpose of draining player resources before Shadowkeep comes out. Thankfully, there is an AFK cheese that normally I wouldn't endorse, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Simply drop your power level really ridiculously low as you can go, and go to a forge, then AFK. Within 30 seconds you'll die, and the timer will count down. This takes about a minute, and the forge will end, throwing you back into matchmaking and granting you a bunch of planetary materials. You can just keep doing this over and over and over and over and over and over again because the game doesn't realize that you're AFK. So you don't have to do any AFK macros on PC, or tie your controller up with 50 different rubber bands pressing down all the buttons. You just load in and let it go. But remember, drop your light level so you're not matching people who are actually trying to do the forge. You're just gonna waste their time, you're just gonna waste your time. Drop your light level, make it ridiculously low, make it to where you can't even damage enemies, and you'll just be loading with a bunch of people trying to do this cheese as well. Good times all around. That said, tying Bad Juju to a resource dump was really skeevy on Bungie's part. Like, I'm not saying, I'm just saying. With all of that out of the way, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, how about Bad Juju? How is Bad Juju, the quest, and the lore? Well, let's start with the lore. This is a lore channel after all. There's actually not much lore here, but this is one of those cases where less, honestly, is more. This, in my opinion, is some of the most important lore to date because it introduces us to, even if only tangentially, what I'm going to be calling the Veil, aka the smoke-looking shadow people and their pyramid ships. Now, I am planning out a much larger video on what the Veil is and what they're doing, or at least what I think they are and what they're doing, because there are a lot of events that we can look back on throughout the history of Destiny and kind of go, that still doesn't make sense, but if we take into account that the Veil were the ones that caused the collapse, well, things start to make a little bit more sense, especially once we get into their motivations. Motivations that Toland kinda clues us in on in this lore tab. If you believe your weapon wants to end all existence, then so it will. Toland, the Shattered. Hello again, my trenchant Dante. You have stepped in and out of the sharp-edged worlds, hewn gods into burnt fractions, twined yourself with powers whose names cannot even be held in the language of little gray cells. You think yourself very high up on the pyramid of contumely, higher than I knew when my radiant killer unsung me from biological squalor, or when I witnessed a royal secret turn death into a chrysalis, higher than I described in my journals or told our mutual three-eyed friend, higher than even I, sailor upon the sea of screams that I am, can yet see. Perhaps I will tell you about them. You're right to ask why I would do so. Very good, dear Squanderer. Your intentions have grown sharp as thrall teeth. You see, they know. What you are, what you were, what you will become, they know. What lean tithes you are to them. Soft whetstones make for dull blades. This I define as the truth intention of the rope. To bind, one must apply force to both ends. I think perhaps I will tell you after all. So we have sword logic, bomb logic, and now rope logic. And all of this makes a lot of sense. If we go into the left field of speculation for a moment, and if Anon the Nine's leaks are correct, which they have been in the past, he states, during the collapse, the god of the Veil was slain in a conflict with the light. Since then, the Veil have been waiting for the Traveler to reawaken so they can siphon its power to resurrect their dead god. And this alleged plot leak for Destiny 3, if correct, does have some breadcrumbs in Destiny 1 and Destiny 2. For example, there's a passage in the Forsaken Prince lorebook titled After the Heart Part 2, which introduces the idea of what the Heart of the Black Garden was. You remember this thing?
So, think you can kill a god?
Don't think I have a choice.
Good times. Man, I really miss Destiny 1 armor and lighting, and graphics, and style, design. But ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, back to the topic at hand, Bad Juju. Anyways, according to this lore book, the Heart of the Black Garden was a tripwire, bait to those who would seek out and destroy what they do not understand, bait for guardians, bait to mark some milestone in the traveler's recovery, which, when you think about it, really begs the question, why would a time traveler come back to this moment in time and divert our timeline from the natural course? More so if the Heart of the Black Garden is supposed to be a trap, because we wouldn't have gone to Venus or sought out the Black Garden had it not been for this moment.
You're interesting. Not entirely interesting, but you have promise.
Who is that?
I don't know. I'm losing the signal.
Guardian, I know what you're about to do. It's brave. But there are enemies out here you would not believe.
Out where?
Go down and face the hive. And if you live, come find me.
Signal dropped. I got some broken coordinates. Venus, Northern Hemisphere, Ishtar region. Great. What do we do now?
We go down.
Which takes us to Venus, where we meet the Exo-Stranger.
Who are you?
Why have you been watching us?
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
So here we have the Exo-Stranger, a time traveler, who came back and diverted the natural course of our timeline. The question is then, if the Heart of the Black Garden is a trap, and the Exo-Stranger is the one that sent us on a quest to spring this trap, whose side is she on? Because we can draw a line of cause and effect from the moment the Exo-Stranger came to our timeline and diverted it to everything that has happened till now. And if the leaks for Destiny 3 are true, and if the Veil were the ones that set up this trap in the Black Garden to mark some milestone in the Traveler's recovery, so they can come and siphon it off when it had enough light so that they could revive their own god, allegedly speaking, and the tripping of this trap was set into motion by the Exo-Stranger, then yeah. The Exo-Stranger has a lot of explaining to do. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. This isn't me scrolling through all the lore and finding things that really didn't make sense, like why was Crota on the moon for centuries and did nothing, even after the Traveler was dead? Why did Oryx not show up, even after the Traveler was dead? In fact, the Hive doing nothing while humanity was crippled goes completely and utterly against their own sword logic. So maybe there was a reason that they didn't do anything. Maybe there was a reason they were just monitoring. Maybe they were also supposed to be bait to mark some milestone in the Traveler's recovery. Hell, you can take this to the not so weird logical conclusion, given what we know about the Ghost, and their primary function being the recovery of the Traveler, and how they're this two-way channel for light between us and the Traveler. And we've always wondered why there are ghosts that will serve with Guardians who have lost the plot and gone to the dark side. Yeah, sure, there's examples of ghosts that don't, but there are also examples of ghosts that would kill you for a blue engram. So, one could logically argue that maybe, just maybe, the ghosts weren't created by the Traveler. All we know about the history of the ghost is that they were created in the collapse. We assume it was created by the Traveler because Guardians want to protect the Traveler. We assume that they were created by the Traveler because it helps in the facilitation of the Traveler's recovery. But what if there was a third party that also had an interest in the Traveler's recovery, for their own nefarious reasons? We already know that the light can be manipulated by machines, and we also know that the ghosts really don't know much about the Traveler, even though they were allegedly created by it. So, what if they weren't? Like I'm saying, some real tip of the iceberg shit here. And the lore tab for Bad Juju helps facilitate all of this. So as far as lore goes, Bad Juju knocks it out of the park. This is proof that sometimes, Bungie, less is in fact more. But what about the quest? Well, once you get past this clearly obvious resource dump set here by Bungie to drain us of resources before Shadowkeep, which you can now circumvent by a community-approved AFK farm, and get all the little statue triumph things you need and place them within your pimped out golden hall of triumphs, which, hey, player housing, kind of. Anyways, once you do this, then you can descend into a new dungeon. This dungeon isn't as difficult nor as long as past dungeons, making it extremely manageable on a solo no-death run. There's not a lot of complexity here. What you see is what you get. There's some ads, some bosses, some jumping puzzles, but nothing too insane. It's fun. It's a knockout, drag-down fight. And I really enjoyed it. But now let's dive into what's likely to be the most controversial part of this entire video. The part where people forget the other 12 minutes of the video and just go,
"But Joker doesn't like anything! He always hates Destiny!"
Even though I just ranted on and on and on and on and on about really cool stuff that I enjoyed and liked. Well, I guess I haven't been called the Killer of Wonder for nothing. I should really get that made into a t-shirt. That along with,
"But Joker!"
So we're gonna start with PvP. And at first I couldn't decide if it was the best pulse rifle in the game or the worst.
Double down. Down. Tell them to line up faster. Strength in numbers, Guardian. Excellent. 2 for 1. 2 for 1. 3 opponents down.
But the more and more I played with it, and honestly, this could have more to do with the current mess that is PvP than the weapon itself. And by mess, I'm not talking about the meta, I'm talking about people turning invisible, or how it really does seem like there's something up with matchmaking. Every game of quick play is super sweaty, but I got to Fabled and competitive in like 20, maybe 25 games with little to no problem, maybe losing a couple of games here and there. That's not to say that this weapon doesn't have problems. When using it, I often found that I'd rather be using something else, like my God-rolled Blast Furnace or Outbreak Prime, or my very close, damn near there, almost God-rolled Austringer. For everything that Bad Juju has, the one thing that it doesn't have is range, so it's often getting outranged by most everything. On top of that, while String of Curses does provide a damage buff, the most lucrative damage buff in the game, doubling Bad Juju's damage for a short time after 5 kills, the upfront and more consistent damage buff from Kill Clip is just more PvP friendly. On top of that, these other weapons are legendary, so they allow me to use something like Truth. But the one thing that Bad Juju can do that these other weapons can't is regenerate your super, which is the whole point of the weapon, so anything else is just a bell or a whistle, right? Right? I feel like the super regeneration is definitely tuned to be safe. So the way that String of Curses works, you don't get a chunk of super regeneration like you would, say, picking up an orb every time you get a kill. You get a chunk of super regeneration based off of how high the modifier for String of Curses is at. So in something like PvP, it's hardly ever going to be that much more than what you already get back for a kill. You have to chain multi-kills together. In PvE though, you have tons of adds, so this was clearly balanced more to be useful in PvE than it was in PvP. That said, it has a lot of issues in PvE as well. For starters, there's just a lot of competition in the first slot, like Mountaintop or Outbreak Prime. The second issue, tangentially related to the first issue, is Bad Juju is kind of redundant, killing legions of adds, especially with the nanites, and doing tons of damage to bosses. And if you have the catalyst and you're killing adds, then you're getting multi-kills, then you're creating orbs, which regen your super. So Bad Juju is realistically just a worse Outbreak Prime that has a really hard time damaging bosses. Sure, it can shred through adds and maybe a major or two, especially with that double damage buff, but it's no Outbreak Prime. And in a game where you have super mods, super refund exotics, and just any legendary weapon that's been masterworked will return super, its one gimmick, the regeneration of super, is kind of redundant. What I'll say is if you don't have anything remotely decent in your primary slot, you could do a lot worse than Bad Juju. However, Bad Juju was created for Destiny 1, not Destiny 2, and it really shows with how redundant it feels in the sandbox. I really wanted to like Bad Juju. The lore is great, the quest was fun, hell, I even bought one of the skins, but it's not quite there. Maybe it's just because it lives in a world where there's already so many better options that just outclass it. Maybe that needs to be looked at, who knows. But like always, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and like always, stay frosty.